Good morning, everybody. Josh Fipley here for GAI Insights, bringing you the Gen AI and AI news. Reading at top, essential, important, or optional. And today we have the core team. We got Tim, Ankash, and myself. We got some interesting articles happening here. Going to put time in your day, thoughts in your head, and remember, you can always follow along by going to gaiinsights.com/articles. If you're joining us live, please feel free to comment, and we'll try to answer and integrate those comments. All right, Akash, if you can kick us off, please.
Good, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from CNBC, and it is titled "Greetings, Earthlings. NVIDIA-backed Star Cloud trains first AI model in space as orbital data center race heats up."
Yeah. Hey, Tim, what do you think? Good morning, Earthlings.
I feel like we should screen what was it, The Day the Earth Stood Still, one of those old science fictions from way back. I think this is optional, first of all, really interesting, but optional. There are big advantages to putting data centers in space, which is what they'll talk about. Obviously, you have uninhibited solar radiation, so power is a lot simpler and you don't have the power problems, which are a big bottleneck here on Earth. And also it's pretty darn cold out in space, so cooling is a little simpler. So there are some real advantages to it, but there are huge disadvantages. Like, if one wire goes wrong on a satellite, the whole thing is bust. I mean, you can't just send a repairman. So there are real challenges to doing this, but I think it will be somewhat viable for specialized use cases. And over time, where time here could be decades or even centuries, but let's say decades at least, sure, it could become very interesting. But in the near future, it's more like early science fiction films. Kind of cool and a different idea, but probably not that consequential.
All right, Akash, what do you think?
Optional for me as well, John. I think a really interesting development. So there has been this fight going on over X.com where Elon Musk first suggested in an interview that we need data centers in space. Then Gavin Newsom in another interview, he suggested that. Then people are saying how you will dissipate heat from that data center. So Elon Musk says that 100 kilowatt data center should already be possible. And these guys have shown that it's actually possible. But if we see the broader scale, a 1 gigawatt center will need 10,000 of such satellites. So it's a huge scale. So as Tim mentioned, it will take decades to reach there, but still an interesting development.
All right.
Yeah. And these things, tend to get hyped. The billionaires love this stuff. They're building their spaceships and running up a couple of $100,000 a trip. And it's interesting. This is how innovation happens. Many of us on this show who are of a certain age remember Iridium, which was the first low Earth orbit satellite network, which was just going to set the world on fire and set the satellites on fire and set a lot of piles of cash on fire, but did not really make much money. But look at Starlink and look at what Amazon's doing. These low Earth orbit satellite networks are now quite viable, but it's almost 30 years later. Yeah, maybe even 30. Well, maybe not quite 30 years, but let's say 3 decades later. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, obviously optional, amazing. I think this isn't real, but to me, not an indication of how the hyperscalers are now just taking another massive innovation area of space and leading certainly the U.S. government. So definitely optional.
Yeah, I had this optional as well. But as you say, Paul, I mean, the scale of these investments is, in the private sector with a bunch of government support, of course, and I think it's really interesting too, the symbiosis between, the massive wealth that's in the Middle East, because we've allowed hydrocarbons to rule our life and politically allowed them to, amass fortunes on the back of that. Now funding, indirectly funding these next efforts of intelligence. So the move from energy converting to transportation and to consumer benefit to energy turning into intelligence. And now, the notion of how you use space in the context of that, I think fascinating set of dynamics. Optional read though. Okay, optional. Akash next.
Okay, the next one is a research paper which is titled A Practical Guide for Designing, Developing, and Deploying Production Grade Agentic AI Workflows.
Yeah, I think I was on this one. I gave this an optional. It's a nice thought piece in terms of how to think about agents and workflows and their activities. It's not something that has been deployed. It's the I think the whole agentic activity, the big missing piece, I think, in how people talk about this is the market power of the people who actually have the transactions. I've studied the evolution of standards over time, and whoever has the flow of transactions usually dominates the conversation about where the standards need to go. And so I think this whole approach of simply having a framework and hoping it'll get adopted really is a kind of a waste of time until you look at the market dynamics of where the flow is. So you look at somebody like Anthropic, who the Menlo Ventures thing we talked about yesterday is doing a great job of selling into the enterprise, and probably has a significant share of agentic development in the enterprise. Looking at the flows of those kinds of organizations, I think are going to be the real case as to where this architecture goes. So I was going to give it an optional, but what do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I'm with you. In fact, I didn't even think it was a very good framework as a technical person. It's okay, but a lot of it is the word I used to use was pablum. Make your systems modular. Okay, good idea.
Thank
I
you.
hope we've learned that by now. and doesn't address some of the really challenging problems, like how do I do consistent and continuous evaluations and deal with drift and MLOps and things that are really difficult in this new environment. So
Yeah.
I think give it a pass.
All right, Akash, Tim's rating this as an article where the rubber meets the sky. What do you think?
Optional for me as well, John. One thing that you mentioned, that it's not into practice right now, it's just research. So that's one. Second is standard is like something that Anthropic and OpenAI are doing now with MCP and agents.md, right? They have open sources to the Linux Foundation, and they are now available for anyone to develop things on top of that. So that's a standard. So optional.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, optional. I mean, this is a classic, really sharp technical people that want to write research papers for other technical people don't have real world experience. I mean, I think what's notable in here is that the MCP Anthropic's donated that now to Linux, a subgroup in Linux now that's got a group, and they're trying to put that. And apparently that's controlled by seven people. But it's, I mean, they need a paper like this looking at the history of standards, John, to your thing that combines kind of the power dynamics plus the technical aspects to show how many times the perfect standard didn't work in EDI and a whole bunch of other areas.
Yeah, well, but I mean, if you look at the internet, right, why did these cooperative organizations like ICON and so forth work? I would say it's because academia and the government, but mostly academia, had all the transactions of the internet, or most of them, before it became commercial. So that's why these cooperative systems work. That's not the case here. This is more like the airline reservation systems, where commercial organizations are out there driving the volume. And so I don't think, I mean, I know the work that Ramesh Raskar is working over at MIT with Project Nanda and so forth, but what frustrates me about these conversations is that for some reason we're averse to talking about market power. Right? Market power is driving everything here. The people with the money and the transactions
Totally agree.
are calling the tune. And come on, wake up.
Totally agree. Yeah.
You know?
In fact, I was deeply involved in standards in a few areas, including the internet and including databases. And databases in the internet really illustrate both sides, because, as you said, the internet was driven mostly by nonprofits and academia,
Right.
and government-funded research, and worked just fine because there were cooperative groups and the whole thing just worked. The database, on the other hand, ended up being completely dominated by IBM, which most people can't ever remember, owned the entire computing user world in the 60s and the 70s, and all of the database activity. And SQL, I can go into many diatribes about what a terrible standard it was compared to others that were proposed at the time, but didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
It just didn't matter. IBM had all the traffic.
Right. And the important thing on the academic thing is that the academy had all the traffic on the internet. as it set the standard.
right.
So it's from the traffic up, not from the concept down. Of course, there's a dialogue between the conceptual stuff down, but it's basically.
Right. And in fact,
standards-
icon was a late thing, which is the thing that does naming and stuff on the internet, came only after 30 years of the internet being around and being worked without anything like it. There were just the 7 or however many, 13 DNS systems that basically controlled everything, and it was just cooperative. There wasn't really an organization in charge. And then, everybody realized as commercial activity started to happen, well, we needed somebody to govern names.
Right.
And so ICON was created at that point.
Yeah. No, I think absolutely true. And people are, anyway, the standards conversation is about market power. And I think people need to understand that. And for the AI leader, you have to pay attention to who's got the volume, because they're gonna call the song, right? Anyway, okay, optional, but I think a very important area about these evolutions of standards. All right, next, Pankaj, please.
Okay, the next one comes from Perplexity, and it talks about the adoption and usage of AI agents.
Yeah, what'd you think, Pankaj?
So, John, this is another adoption study in a slew of adoption studies that we have seen over the last 2 weeks, right? And this one talks about the adoption of comment-based agents and the things that they are being used for. So the findings include that most of them are being used for hard cognitive work, as Perplexity says. So for 36%, it's related to productivity, and 21% related to learning and research. I was between optional and important for this one, John, because the findings, while they make sense from a Perplexity perspective, I feel they are somewhat biased. And this is something that deep research does really well. All the findings, all the topics that they have mentioned, where people are using Perplexity. So I was slightly looking for proper data for the study, which is not there. So maybe optional for me, John.
All right, so important topic, data-driven. You're worried about the provenance, as my friend of mine overuses the word, of the data. What do you think, Paul?
Yes. Am I still mute?
You're good.
Yeah, no, optional. I thought it was a little obvious that the high cognitive work is being done by Perplexity, which is one of the leaders of the deep research tools. So optional.
Tim?
Agree, Yeah, pretty obvious stuff. Interesting. I mean, I wouldn't argue with having people read it, but given how much there is to read, I can't really put this on even the important list, because we have so much. As Pankaj pointed out, Perplexity is interesting, but compared to the data that Anthropic and OpenAI can put out, it's just a drop in the ocean. So these things, I'd read the ones from OpenAI and Anthropic, because they just have much more robust data.
Perplexity is such an interesting early on innovative thing, but they're getting marginalized, and if they don't get bought, they may just be an afterthought 2 years from now.
Yeah, it's really interesting how quickly this market is settling down. I was thinking about important for this one. Let me tell you why. I think this whole notion, I think it's obvious to us because we live in it all the time, but this notion of the new knowledge work is question work, I think, is a really interesting way to frame it. There's some, I think we saw this kind of thread across the different things. Vivek Mukhtar, just a post yesterday about how each individual is like a little organization, and that they're evolving. And then we saw, I forget if it was the OpenAI one or the Anthropic one, that said that over 20% of the work being done wouldn't have been done because it wouldn't with the models, because it wouldn't reach a threshold of investment or attention. But as you lower the utility, and I think there's so much productivity in the question work stuff. But I'm talking myself into an optional, because this is a kind of a thin read to lean on for this important topic. All right, optional it is.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This one, again, adoption study from Microsoft this time, and it is titled the Copilot Usage Report 2025.
All right, so here we have Microsoft trying to stay in the
Yeah, again, I sort of feel like very similar to Perplexity. Microsoft obviously is going to have a lot more data. So if you're going to read one of these two, I'd read this one. But the thing is that they pretty much exclude all their enterprise data because of their agreements not to use it, or at least that's what the implication was. So really, this is mostly consumer data, it sounds like to me, which is okay. It's good data, but it's not the same. And again, perhaps not as relevant for an AI leader within a company who's looking more for what enterprises are doing. And again, nothing earth shattering that's like, oh my God, I didn't expect that kind of thing. So interesting, but I would probably still give it a pass.
Ankush?
Between optional and important for this one as well, John. I think one message from this study where it talked about how people are using these bots on devices, right? What separate those two? So for mobile phones, it's more about health-related concerns. For laptops, between 8 to 5 p.m., it's more about the work that people are doing. So while that's obvious from what we have read till now about how people are adopting these things, but I think that's something we can highlight from this. But still, as Tim mentioned, not a great chunk that an AI leader can take out of this.
All righty. Paul, what'd you think?
Yeah, I was really hopeful when I went in until I realized it was all consumer. And I think the consumer side, you've got, the B2C leaders are ChatGPT and, maybe Gemini. And, I think their silence against the OpenAI report earlier this week is notable. I mean, every company we're talking to is trying to decide between Copilot and ChatGPT. And, I think they missed an opportunity to at least add to that conversation. So optional.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to make a case for important here. Let me try on this one. And the reason is the articulation of task and time. If you think about management process for a minute, and I'm heavily influenced by a study we did in the 1980s on the nature of electronic communication, the evolution of management practice. And we did, at the time, we used a bunch of tools from mathematical sociology, like block modeling, things like sophisticated network analysis. We also did programmatic assessment of, what the organizational routines were and how those changed as you added electronic mail. And we did a pretty comprehensive study across all kinds of communication. And the thing that struck me is that your ability as an executive to engineer processes and roles and productivity in organization, when you have this kind of CAT scanner of activity, it's just amazing. And this Microsoft report is the first one I've seen that really has that granularity of topics and time and process over time. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate just that these models are going to allow the CAT scanner of knowledge work, and especially when you get above the work of just one individual. And anyway, this doesn't make the case for that, but it gives you at least as an executive, you can say, oh my goodness, you can actually see the soft tissue in this CAT scan, right?
Yeah.
Not just the X-ray. And so anyway, that's where.
Yeah. And John, just a footnote to that, we saw that at Blue Cross Blue Shield, Michigan, where the humans were driving the token usage from 9 to 2 until they added a lot of agents.
Yeah.
And then it went 24 hours.
Yeah. And this is, if you think back to like what scientific management did, Taylor and then Ford and so forth with the development of physical work, right? It had a massive impact. I think we're going to say the same thing here. But the evolution of it will be more a combination of hierarchy and markets. So I think because if you think of tasks or activities as transactions, like a financial transaction, what MCP and NEN and so forth are doing is that they're creating an environment where you can transact pieces of knowledge and knowledge work, and that may sit inside an organization at the boundary or outside. So I think we're going to see markets and capability like we've never seen before, and it's going to be incredibly tradable. And that's going to lead to very different kinds of organizations and investments. Anyway, Ronald Coase would be happy, for those of you who know Coase in economics. Anyway, all right, I'm talking myself into optional. Next.
Okay, the next one comes from
It's
Salesforce, and
he's
it's about
dangerous. He's got the chalk and he's talking himself into the answer here. So we're seeing it real time. It's like,
Well, the
I
most
myself
amazing thing is he's
virus it.
being quite reasonable today,
yes.
Oh, as opposed to the
as opposed to his normal state.
yeah, I hate that.
I'm feeling okay.
That's like one of those comments like, I don't want this to be an academic exercise, to which I say, you mean academic exercise like the creation of the A bomb? Anyway,
You won't get an argument from me on that one.
yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem with the AI market today is it got to commercial way too fast.
Yes, I would put it slightly differently, which is that the balance between commercial and research is completely out of whack.
Okay. Yes,
but yes,
that's fine.
Same spirit. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
Okay, the next one is about a new model called April 1.6 15 billion parameter thinker model, which is a cost-efficient frontier multimodal model.
Yes, for me, this is optional. Yet another model, decent performance, multimodal, and as you can see in the middle of the pack of a bunch of model activity. So everyday miracles, but optional for AI leader. What do you think, Ankush?
Option for me as well, John. I have a question. Why does ServiceNow, Salesforce keep on working on these models for themselves when they already have partnerships with the bigger firms and they are using their models and their models don't perform as well?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, I think it's super smart because what I think they're doing is they're vertically integrating into this capability, and they recognize that if they're going to lose market power as a SaaS vendor, if I don't vertically integrate into my own models, I think I'm going to lose massive market power in the medium to long term to the hyperscalers who have that capability. So I just think, right. In addition, even if there's a set of, if you've ever worked in a complex setting, especially a science-based setting or a analytics-based setting or an engineering-based setting like oil rigs or something like that, there's all the explicit stuff and the data and so forth you run the business with, but then there's all the tacit knowledge about what to do, how to do it, what sequence of activities, where you should put your attention, that kind of stuff. If the ServiceNow people know a ton about the granularity of service in different kinds of settings and mobile and desk and time of day and India and the whole routine. You don't want to teach a hyperscaler how to do that stuff. I mean, I don't if I'm running ServiceNow, because the thing that people forget, and I went back and looked at the antitrust stuff from Sherman and Clayton Act and so forth, is when we had antitrust, it had two things: consumer harm and it had industrial power, right? Because remember, J.P. Morgan was out, running countries with his bank, right? And so was Rockefeller, right? He was telling countries what to do. And so the antitrust movement was, you don't want companies that have so much power that they're more powerful than governments. And the knuckleheads down at University of Chicago turned it all into consumer harm, in their arguments, which took out the institutional power part of that. The problem with these hyperscalers is they have massive institutional power. They can tell whole countries to pound sand. When they find, the EU fines Google $5 billion, that's 2.5 weeks of activity. I mean, come on, it's not even a month's worth of EBITDA. So it's irrelevant to them. It's a small tax, right? Cost of doing business, 2% tax, 3% tax for 1 year. It's nuts. So if I'm ServiceNow, I should be very worried about that, right? Because not only do they have that market power, but then if they don't want to do it underneath the Google stock price, the people involved in Google, involved in Silicon Valley, can raise over $1 trillion to create a new company to go at my business. So I think it's very wise to be wary of the power of these folks. So that would be my answer, Akash. I don't know if you agree with that, but
I think you're attributing way too much to them, but it's logical. I think it's more and I do think it's actually smart, but I think it's more just about controlling costs. I think the vertical integration piece is right, that they're thinking, oh, this is going to become more and more a core part of my business. I need to understand how to control costs and just how to generally have control. Corporations and people in general are control freaks. And I think you don't have to get into heavy strategic discussions to get an answer that makes sense to them. And it turns out to be pretty smart in the way you describe, but I'm not sure they realize that.
All right.
One footnote here, I think it is at least notable to me that, in databases, that was a whole just infrastructure layer, operating systems infrastructure layer. We've got these companies who are leading this intelligence layer already getting into vertical lease use cases like financial services and life sciences we've seen. And we've not seen that. And that's definitely a shot across the bow of all this vertical SAP vendors in certain areas.
Yeah, and as we pointed out, many years ago in our work on the virtual value chain and the physical value chain, that as you have a better and better virtual value chain, most of the value in an industry and the market power migrates to those who have a better virtual value chain. And they may vertically integrate into a physical value chain if they have to, but the virtual value chain is where the money is. And so, this is a massive extension of the virtual value chain. Anyway.
I think there's an argument to be made too that this is really about risk management, and risk management has dramatically shifted in the software arena with these new models. And because I was there in the 70s and the 80s, and most of the reason the big software companies won was because corporations were failing to get anything done. It wasn't that they liked outsourcing their database to Oracle. It was just that Oracle would work. They could get it working, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars with Accenture, back then Anderson, and their own COBOL people, and got nothing.
Right. Now, very interesting. Yeah. So it's really a capability buy in addition to a capacity buy. Yeah.
Just John, before we leave this topic, we got artificial analysis chart up here. Just another kudos to those guys. I think they're just doing fabulous.
Yeah, they do great work.
Research and graphics.
Absolutely. All right. Akash, next.
Okay, the last one that we have for today comes from VentureBeat, and it is titled How HUD's the Runtime Sensor Cuts Triage Time from 3 hours to 10 minutes.
Yeah, Akash, what do you think here?
So John, this is a product announcement from HUD. So what they have done is they have shipped a runtime code sensor SDK, and it is related to the code slop that we are seeing from these AI coding agents. So basically, the traditional tools which monitor when something goes wrong on the in the code, they are not able to match the pace at which these AI coding agents are generating code, and they can't provide you real-time feedback on what's going wrong in the code. They sort of collect logs at the end of the process, and they are not able to pinpoint where the code is wrong. So what HUD is doing is this runtime code sensor SDK, they embed it into function in production, and then it captures snapshots when something goes wrong. It not only checks when something goes wrong, but it also tells the user that, okay, this particular thing is wrong. And they have shared some examples of customers like Monday.com and Data, where their manual incident triage time has cut from 3 hours to 10 minutes. So while this is a product launch, I think this is an important area, and we might see more products launching in this area soon. So I was maybe important on this one rather than optional because it's a product announcement.
All righty, Akash making the impassioned case for important here. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I wouldn't argue, and I sort of had the same mentality. I'd still call it optional. It's a brand new company. It's a product announcement. They have a couple of customers, at least, to Paul's usual complaint. So they at least have a couple of customers, but still early days. I think it is a real problem, having run many very large operations, including healthcare.gov, which was an incredible Rube Goldberg in the day. This is a real problem, even for non-AI systems, and it's a real problem for AI systems, but it's fundamental to the architecture of the way it's developed today. So there are all sorts of other sides that they don't talk about, like, well, you do need to get people to put these calls into their code. And they're simple calls in theory, but, and they add overhead to every function invocation. So people are going to be shy about this, I think, for a while. And unfortunately, I think the root cause is not really paying attention to the work that was done around decentralized systems, because that's a real problem, as a typical system has 40 or 50 different individual applications, or call them whatever you will, modules. And the interactions are usually the problem. It's not usually within a function. It's usually some interaction that's unexpected between the functions that causes a context that doesn't work. And that's hard to trace even with this stuff.
All right. What did you think here, Paul?
Really well said, Tim. Optional.
All righty. And for those of you who don't know what Rube Goldberg is, I've put it in the I put in an illustration. It's a complex machine to do a simple task, but cartoony way. I just put it in the chat here. All right, that's it. So I'm going to go optional. So we have a no-hitter, our third no-hitter in the 472nd
Really?
episode. Yes, sir. So
exciting on one level, because some weeks we have like so many essentials. So I'm
right. And for those of you who don't follow American baseball, it's a rare occurrence that there's absolutely no hits in 9 innings.
No hitters, right? Very rare.
For our,
you got to have the sharpest pitchers.
For our Commonwealth friends, think of baseball as cricket for dummies. Okay. We have the tote board. Oh, nobody did the tote board. Okay, sorry. It's all optional. There you go. Paul, announcements or Tim?
Yeah, 2 announcements. One today at noon Eastern, we'll have our weekly ChatGPT 101. Encourage everyone to go to that. And we're also I've already posted online, Jenny from our team's wonderful 201 for ChatGPT, which is a part 1 and part 2. And John, you're you're the showcase for Monday's Learning Lab. You want to share what you're doing on hybrid?
Yes, going to be doing how we think about hybrid organizations, what it means, what the economic returns could be, some of the operating practices, and how you can make your organization hybrid before it's too late.
Yeah. And Tim, anything new?
And I have one quick announcement for the company I work part-time for, Manat, Phelps and Phillips. So today at 2:00, there's a pretty interesting webinar if you're deploying any kind of chatbot from Todd Cohen. He's a lawyer partner, but also a tech guy who's going to talk about the legal and regulatory issues of deploying chatbots. So that's going to become an issue, I think, for just about everybody. So interesting. Just Google Manat webinars. It's 2 p.m. East Coast time today.
Very good. Thank you. All righty. With that, goodbye, everybody. See you tomorrow morning. Take care. All right.